Hi, everybody. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Jeremy, and I would like to welcome you to the third in our autumn-winter series of webinars. Last week's session was on letters of instruction. Hopefully, you all got a chance to dial in on that one. If you didn't, the recording is on our website. Today, we're going to turn to something called cash flow modeling, which some of you will be aware of, but it might be new to some of you. I'm really excited about today's topic. Cash flow has always been embedded in our financial planning side of our business, but we are increasingly using it in the divorce context. By that, I mean helping couples reach agreement on splitting finances. Indeed, I recently worked on a £6 million case where cash flow was used to unblock the obstacles to a potential settlement. Hopefully, today's session will be a light bulb moment for some of you. Before I introduce today's speaker, a quick note to invite questions from you all as the session goes through. This is achieved by asking your questions on the question and answer tab within Zoom. I'll be on mute behind the scenes, trying to answer as many of those questions as possible, and hopefully we'll have some time at the end where we can pick up any stray questions as well. So we will be recording the session so that it will be added to our website. We've got quite a lot of collateral on our website that is there for you to use. We'll also send you a copy of the slides and a copy of the recording as well. I'm now about to introduce today's speaker. So our speaker today is Rob Starling. Rob is a co-owner of Blue Sky. He's also a resolution accredited specialist. He's a chartered and certified financial planner. Rob has been working here at Blue Sky for over 12 years now and is an expert in all things pension on divorce related. So Rob, over to you.
Thank you for the introduction, Jeremy, and thank you everybody for joining me. This is, as Jeremy said, the last of the three sessions that we've got here in the autumn. We're certainly up for ideas for what to do when we get round to maybe springtime next year for the next subjects. But on with today's session, all about cash flow. Now, this could definitely test our IT capabilities here, because the good news for you watching and listening is that there is less than 20 slides to go through. The jeopardy moment is I'm going to use two PCs because the cash flow software we're going to flip to live. So I'm certainly keeping my fingers crossed that IT works in my favor, but we shall see. Right. On we go. This slide I'm not going to stick on too much. If this is the third time you've been to one of our webinars in this autumn series, you've seen this before. Long story short, Blue Sky's got lots of experts, particularly around the subject of divorce. We've been doing it for a long time. And long story short, if you need some help, drop us a line. Right, okay, on to cash flow. What is it? Let's start nice and simple. In its most basic form, it is a method of forecasting how future finances may pan out. It could just simply be a fancy Excel spreadsheet, or maybe not that fancy. But for financial planners, well, we have access to quite a range of fancy modeling tools, some of them very basic, some of them very advanced. As Jeremy's alluded to earlier on, every personal client that Blue Sky takes on has a cash flow model. For those clients, we might answer big questions like, well, can I retire? And if so, when? What might it look like? It could be some anxiety around, well, are my financial affairs robust enough that they can cope with long-term care? Is it likely to cause jeopardy to our financial position? Should we plan a different answer? But for many clients, perhaps it's all about inheritance tax planning. They want to maybe make sure that they've got a trusted partner that they can work with who can maybe find that balancing point between giving money away, but maybe not giving too much money away, because then that might bring jeopardy for long-term care, for example. How do we deal with a scenario as the other side is the wife or the husband of the deceased? Are they financially still able to look after themselves? You know, we can role play all of these things with cash flow models. Ultimately, though, For us, when we're building cash flow models, we like to start with, well, look, what's your big aim in life? Where is it you want to go? It's not an uncommon soundbite in one of our planning meetings with our newer clients, where we ask them to dream a bit harder, because it has that ability for us to look into the future a bit and maybe make a dream happen. Whereas without it, we might find that a client is holding themselves back. They daren't do it. I'm sure I don't have enough money for that, they might say. For Blue Sky, look, we've been using cash flow modeling for a long time now. This is not a new trick for Blue Sky. I certainly have been using cash flow in some shape or form for 20 years. And yes, I did start with some pretty complex Excel spreadsheets. For Blue Sky, we use a piece of software known as Voyant. I haven't done any research on the other providers now for probably well over a decade. And one of the reasons for that is, to my knowledge still, there's probably two providers who really go to town to a high level of minutiae in terms of the cash flow modeling tool, and Voyant is one of those tools. Voyant have a commitment. They're actually a company I think was that originally started in the US, so there's a US version of Voyant and a UK version. But whenever there's a taxation change in the UK, whether it's a budget or there's removed the lifetime allowance, or it's the start of the new tax year and all the rates have gone up, or the thresholds have gone up, we're in a pretty comfortable place as far as Voyant's concerned, because we always know that they've already updated that information for us. That means that the software can be pretty accurate when it comes to income tax, capital gains tax, and inheritance tax. I'm going to use the live software in a minute, but look, one of the good things about the version of the software that we use, Voyant, is that we can get an awful lot of graphs from it. Being, I guess, a relative dab hand at how to use the software, I can look at a graph like this and instantly know whether a client has a problem. So just to give you a bit of a flavor as to what that means, this particular graph is highlighting, oh, sorry, bear with me. No, that way. I'm sure that one won't make the final edit, Jeremy. Mouse is too sensitive, right. There we go. Let's just scoot over there. Okay, this each one of these bars that you can hopefully see. In fact, I think I found a clever attachment on PowerPoint that means I can do a laser pointer. There we go. Each one of these bars represents a year in an individual's life. We can see in this version of the software that we've got someone that's working for 2 years, a couple that are working for 2 years. We can also see, and this is the first thing perhaps we always are looking for in a cash flow model, is does the model go red? Is there a shortfall? And we can see in this screenshot version that I put into this slide that there is issues coming for this particular couple around about age 94. What else can we derive from this? Well, this dark blue, that's state pensions. We can see that the husband's, I'm assuming the husband is the eldest age, is kicking in at 66, the wife at 67. That's that dark blue. That's the reason why it's a step. I can tell that this person was in some kind of final salary pension scheme that gave a lump sum to the wife age 65. We can see that we're eating pension, defined contribution pensions, and red denotes for us that this couple have run out of liquid assets to supplement their lifestyle at age 94-ish. So quick view, it's good, it's useful for me as the financial planner. It means that we can work with that client in terms of understanding where maybe compromises might need to exist. It doesn't tell the full story, it doesn't tell me about all the other assets that they've got. So if that's cash flow, how could this be relevant to the divorce scene? Well, here's a slide that's been rolled out a few times now in Blue Sky's presentations. And this particular slide talks about the various touch points that we think you might want help from a financial planner all the way across the divorce timeline. We can see at the beginning here, that initial scoping chat. You can see that we've inserted cash flow in here. I've got an example one of my live examples I'm going to throw to in a minute, that will maybe bring that more to life. In that middle stage, where perhaps historically you're thinking, well, I probably need a pension sharing report, I'll use Blue Sky for the PODE report. Well, we also think that the cash flow comes in as a useful help at that point as well. And I've got another example of that coming up in a minute, where we've maybe stress tested potential divorce outcomes using the software. So that's quite useful. And then all the way through to the other side, they're divorced. For Blue Sky, if we're ever asked to do implementation of a pension sharing order, as already intimated, we will always do cash flow modeling for that client, so that they have that view into the future, not just for the simple aspect, let's say, of doing a pension share implementation, but for perhaps that wider, well, what's life going to look like? It's frequently the case when we are asked to assist with the post-divorce implementation, that we might come across one of the parties, let's say it was maybe the wife in this instance, who didn't deal with much of the finances during the marriage, and so using cash flow modelling can really help to calm in that particular instance as well. So it's certainly our belief that cash flow modelling in the divorce arena can definitely help. Why? Another slide that's a repeat, if you've seen many of our presentations, is this one. I'm sure some of you are aware of the Kubler-Ross grief cycle or change cycle. The more we've done cash flow work in the area of divorce, the more I'm convinced that it helps. If you're not aware of it, I'll just quickly run through it. Let's say prior to divorce, there's normal functioning. Everybody feels that everything's all pretty good. In fact, actually, at the point that separation is perhaps first mentioned, it might still feel, oh, that's fine, it'll be okay. And that's where we see this denial phase coming in here. When it eventually, let's say, drops, oh no, this is definitely going to happen. We then start seeing the anger, the frustration, irritation, and we see anxiety, which of course, as you can see in the grief cycle, the implication is that leads to depression. If it was just simply, and I've got some observations from our perspective, our house, then after depression, we eventually reach a point of bargaining, eventually through to acceptance and return to meaningful life. The reason why the cross is in there is because it comes to our attention that actually bargaining hits a bit of a roadblock, a bit of a wall, and the poor old individual slips back down and gets stuck in this cycle of anger, depression, bargaining, anger, depression, bargaining. It's certainly my feeling that you can help lessen the effect of that blocker that's in there via the use of cash flow. Like I've got a few examples that are coming up which should help us. Or help me to explain to you where I think the cash flow can really help. So on that particular vein, let's move on to my next slide. And what I'm going to try and do is frame up what we're about to see on the live software. Okay, so a bit of a backstory here. I believe it was around about November of, it was November, a week in November of 2020. I got pretty much the exact same phone call from 3 separate gentlemen, all in the same week. And what we, let's just make sure our slides work. Okay, all 3 were husbands. All 3 had just been informed that their wives were wishing to separate. And I'm sure this will come as no surprise to many of you. All 3 had cited quite negative financial thoughts, such as, I'm financially ruined. How am I going to survive? She's going to have all of my pensions. She can't have that pension. We weren't even living together. I'm sure lots of these sound bites will sound familiar to you. So, assuming I can work out the IT correctly, which I think I can, just bear with me. Just bear with me. I'm just going to do an alternative screen share, and I'm going to throw directly to the live software. Here we go. Okay. So this is a live version of the cash flow. The name for the client has been changed. Naturally, the client wasn't actually called Mickey Mouse. But here is the live software. Some observations for you as we go through. So this is the classic, what I call, and Jeremy, myself, and the other team members here call the classic blue-red graph. In this version of the graph, we can see that there appears to be no red in the model. Now, it's important for me to stress to you that this version of the model, we call it a base plan, we plugged into it everything about this particular gentleman before divorce occurred. All right, so naturally, he says, I'm not expecting to see any red because there's been no pension shared, there's been no asset split, etc., etc. In terms of how clever the software is, you can see that we've been able to put in the individual's name. We've been able to put in information like what their employed earnings are, the value of all relevant assets that they've got in terms of savings and investments. There were a couple of properties owned by this couple. They had their marital home, but actually, I think things had been bad for a little while, and the husband had elected to get an apartment on the other side of the town that they lived in, which happened to be relatively close to the school that one of their children went to. But anyway, we had two properties. Pensions. Now, this is interesting because at the point that we did this, he did not know enough about her pension. So it's just got his pensions in this original incarnation. So that's important to see. There was a little bit of mortgage debt, and expenses-wise, those were his expenses. I set him some homework and said, look, come on, tell me how much it costs to run. It could be argued that something like completion of a Form E, the data held within a Form E, would be sufficient. And in fact, I've got a case study coming up in a minute where that was literally all I was given on a case, was I was given a copy of the Form E and we merrily plugged it straight into the Voyant software. Each one of these entries can be tremendously complex. If I went into, let's have a look, one of the final salary pension schemes, I could tell it how many years service a person's got, what happens in the event of death. It is extremely technical, the software that we're using, but at a high level, you can see we've got a nice little asset summary kicking around there. Right. I'm just going to, in fact, I might call for a bit of Jeremy help actually, because I need to go for a bit of extra detail. But whilst he's coming, I'm going to layer in on a bit more depth here. What we can see in this graph. Is we've got this gentleman working for just 1 year. This color blue reflects the fact he's only intending to work for this current year. As I said earlier on, we've got state pension kicking around. We've got his final salary pension coming into play. And we can also see this black line, which denotes total expenditure. It's way above what he's going to get from his final salary pension, denoted in green. So he's needing to find another asset with which to supplement his income stream. And in this case, he's needing to dip into his pension pot in order to, his defined contribution pension pot, in order to supplement his income. I've got another graph which is can sometimes be interesting for us as the financial planners, and it's this one. This is an asset breakdown. We'll just wait for that to load. We can see here this color at the bottom. That is the two properties, the main residence and the second property that he's currently living in. Investments is denoted by the dark blue. There is cash missing in this graph. Not a lot of it. You can see as I hold my mouse over when this gentleman was 60, there's only about circa 8K of cash, but there is quite a reasonable amount of pension. In short, if they'd have stayed together, the chance of their model going red was relatively limited. He was in a good place as a couple. So that's useful. Now, just bear with me a second. I'm just going to adjust the screen slightly because it's hiding what I wanted to show. Okay. So on the first day when he came in and he was very pessimistic, the first thing we did is I ran a role play for him that suggested that he lost 50% of the value of the property, 50% of the value of the pensions, and what would that physically do? Because that was how he started the conversation off. Oh, I'm going to lose nearly everything. Now, it's worthwhile highlighting that he did not have a knowledge of her pension scheme at this point. So either way, we ran that scenario quite quickly for him. Just wait for that to load up. There we go. And you will find when it does load up that there is no red. Now, I've got to tell you well, pretty much that calmed the gentleman straight away. I was able to say to him, look, you know what, you're going to almost certainly need a pension sharing report to deal with the various pensions that you've got and that we don't know that she's got, but we know that she's got some. But so this model is probably as pessimistic as it ever could be, but we can build on it as time goes by. Just a quick point of an area where the software is so easy for us to work with is that once we've created the original base version of the model, we can clone it via what we call a what-if scenario. And that's exactly what's occurring here. When I click up here, you can see that the very first model that we created was on a 50-50 split. Now, what happened over the months that followed is I suggested to the gentleman that he comes back and informs me each time there's a debate about a potential settlement. And you can see that there are numerous subsequent what-if models that were created over time to reflect it. The final destination in this particular case was how we ended up just here. It's worth noting that we plugged in a pension sharing report and the recommendations in terms of how much was going to be needing to be passed on of his various pensions. Should any of you be wondering, could we do the pension sharing report in this instance? The answer is no. We most certainly did not, because obviously we were acting for one of the parties, so it most certainly wasn't prudent for us to act in the neutral factor of aspect of us being the POD in this particular case. But what we were able to do was to plug this in to reflect his new life as he planned it. We can see, just to give you a bit of an indication, I can tell you that spike in the early years was the sale of the marital home, which generated some cash. In fact, just to give you another indication of how clever the software can be, if I click on a year, you can see I've got a tab here that says cash flow. That's effectively money in. I've got a tab here that says money out. I've got running values on what his investments might be, pensions, ditto. All right. We can see here in year 2, he doesn't own 2 properties anymore. He just owns his apartment. He does, however, as we can see from the cash flow, end up with a large input of cash, which was his remaining share from the value of the house sale. Okay. So long story short, in that early stage, right at the beginning of somebody starting their journey going through divorce, it can prove quite useful. It can certainly help with calming an individual who might be thinking the worst about how the finances are going to work. In this case, it was kind of lucky, let's say, because on many occasions we might run a cash flow model and we do see red. And in fact, I've got a couple of those coming up in my explanations. So if I flip back to my original presentation again, as let's bring that back. There we go. I think that's got us back to my original presentation. Look, let's bring ourselves back then to the Kubler-Ross and understand, well, what client outcomes would have occurred for that early engagement for this particular client. Well, I definitely think he was able to visualize the future, which can help to address some of that early anxiety. It's beginning to get the mindset along the lines of bargaining. So I definitely believe in that instance, as it was for the other 2 who I took on in that same week. The cash flow was really able to help, not with that particular gentleman who came to me directly, but one of the other gentlemen who came to me directly, he ended up in the end asking could his solicitor join us in a future cash flow meeting, which was a very good way for us to really articulate what was going on, and we've had quite a good relationship with that solicitor as a result of that moving forwards. It can certainly help, as we've seen in that example, in terms of strategizing potential settlements. Okay, right. Let's move on to my second scenario. And this has got to be one of the very first cases that I felt an application of cash flow modeling would work for the divorce. This, as you can see from the slide, was approached by a solicitor who was recalling a case that they were working on, where the case had become stuck on the back of a £40,000 NHS additional voluntary contribution pension, and whether or not the wife should put in a claim for it or not. The background to this couple was that both of them had worked for the NHS, or were working for the NHS, for some days in the week, and on the other days in the week they were private practice. It'd been difficult all the way through in terms of negotiations, but this looked like it was pretty much the last item. However, it had become, because of the negotiations taking quite a while, it become quite a sticking point, and the solicitors acting on behalf of the husband had basically said, look, we're not going to budge, we're going to go back to court. You can't have the £40,000. So in this particular instance, I suggested I might be able to help via the use of cash flow modelling, and with the client's agreement, the solicitor was able to send across to me a copy of the Form E and the pension sharing report that had been done, once again, not by us, and I was able to build a cash flow model to hopefully help the wife and the solicitor visualise her financial future, both with and without the £40,000 AVC. So once again, if we're lucky enough, technology, look at that. We've got this working now, Jeremy. Right, okay. So in this particular instance, we've got our cash flow model. We can see that we've got a little bit of red in there. Okay. But actually, the key thing I wanted to get across to this particular solicitor and client was, why do they think they need the £40,000? And I'm sure this is a common experience for all of us involved in divorce, is that without this visualization with something like cash flow modeling, there can be land grab. Oh, I need this, I need that. Why do you need that? Well, I don't know, but I want it anyway, because I don't know how my future is going to go. So I want more of the money in the bank account. I want more of this. I want the £40,000 AVC. Anyway, I was able to articulate this in cash flow modeling, as you saw on the prior model. You know that we've already data entered everything for this particular individual into it, all the expenditure items, the earnings, etc., etc. That massive, great big spike there is the sale of the former marital home and the purchase of a new one. We've put all of that in. Now, the gap in the middle is red, and the gap in the middle is largely caused by virtue of needing to pay for the children's education. But either way, I was able to show this to both parties. The solicitor was particularly keen that I repeat myself by having another session directly with his client. And upon explaining it to the client said, "Oh, well, actually, this is pretty good. Aside from that bit of red in the middle, I can see that life after divorce, I'm going to be largely okay. Perhaps it might have opened discussions about whether they needed a house the size they needed it, because, of course, if they didn't buy the house at that price, there'd be more cash, which might get rid of the red in the middle." But actually, the biggest soundbite that I had from the client was, "Well, I've got to tell you, I might have been a bit strong on my expenditure on the Form E, and I shall also say that actually I might end up working, now that I know this, I might actually work a bit more time in that period between 57 and 64. In short, I'm not worried about this. In fact, this is fantastic news, he said, because I can now visualize what's going to happen in the future. And well, to cut a long story short, the meeting finished, and relatively soon afterwards, they wrote out to, or made contact with the husband's solicitor to say that they did not need the £40,000 NHS AVC anymore, and the divorce was able to finalise pretty quickly. So a good news piece. I don't intend going through each one of the minutiae in this particular scenario, but we did also role play that she could potentially utilize some of those pensions that she had elsewhere by taking the tax-free lump sums, which actually helped to reduce the amount of red. In short, we were able to, in the first scenario, tell her how it was going to look unless she took some actions, and then we were able to offer some constructive financial planning thoughts that would help to reduce the size of the red, which she actually managed to get to move entirely simply by being more mindful on expenditure and obviously upping her hours. So it was another good news case. Right, let's skip back to my other screen. Again, there we go. Okay, that looks like that's worked. Okay, so that was an example in that particular case, the made-up case of Dr. Foster. What potential benefits do we see in that case? Well, I definitely think it helped to manage that land grab mentality that can sometimes occur, and actually it really helped her to gain some focus on what life was going to look like after the divorce, which in turn helped to iron out the debate or the conflict matter in this instance of the NHS AVC. Okay, on to another one. We're not going to use live cash flow modeling in this one. Let's just move on to the next case. Right, this particular case or application will highlight how this could definitely work, cash flow modeling, in an environment of mediation and collaboration. Now, a bit of context on this one. The husband and wife had been trying to formalise their separation for 7 years. They had switched from mediation to solicitors twice, and were now trying arbitration. It wasn't a big money case, but it had quite a few issues around it. Now, if you bear with me as I just change my screen share to a Word document, and if I can multitask, I shall tell you why I've done it in Word. The reason why I'm doing it in Word is because in this particular application, it's not possible to, that's the one I want. I think it's just, no, not that one. Just bear with me. In this particular application, what we have is I need to use 2 separate clients as, so just bear with me. Oh, there we go. That's the one I'm after. That's the one I'm after. Right. In this particular application, what I need to do is it's not possible for me to have the live software open at the same time, because I need to create 2 totally separate cash flow models, one for the husband, one for the wife. So I can tell you that what you're about to see was based on exactly the way that this story played out. So hopefully you can now see my Word document, and I should talk you through what's happened in this particular instance. On this first Word document, first page of the Word document, you can see the classic blue-red graph, and it reflects the position for the husband, assuming that there are no shares of pensions, no asset splits whatsoever. So this is, as we call it often in our cash flow software, the base plan. So it's highlighting that everything looks pretty good for him. Certainly there's no red in the model. So if that's the situation for him, what's the situation for the wife? Once again, no pension shares were put into play in this. This is just saying what's going to happen for her. You can see I put a few labels in here. We can see that the state pension is this piece of blue. She's going to work a little bit and deplete savings to meet her expenditure needs. But we can see the big problem in this particular mediation case, in that we've got one party looks okay. The other party, in theory, has run out of all money around about age 58. So we move on to the next graph. This is the asset graph. I showed you that earlier on with the very first case for the client that we called Mickey Mouse. We could see that there was property denoted in there and cash and everything. Now, in this particular instance, this is the husband's graph again, and it's highlighting, well, actually, he's got a reasonable amount of pension kicking around in there. And that was, by the way, was even after the pension share had been deducted. So maybe there's some scope there that we could be more generous in terms of giving more from him to her to try and make these cash flow models balance up a little better. And well, first things first, let's just imagine that a straight pension share was just passed straight to the wife. Well, based on the expenditure patterns that she'd previously talked about, and I've got more on that in a second, that pension share from him to her has done not a lot at all. In fact, if we compare the two graphs, we can see that we ran out of money previously at around about 58. And with the pension share, all that's actually occurred is bought her 2 more years worth of income. Aside from that, we've still got an awful lot of red and therefore still have a big problem. The story carried on. One of the big problems I can imagine that you might have foreseen in this is expenditure. And that caused, in this instance, quite the debate. A debate that we found a nice, happy compromise on in the end. I'm sure you can imagine the kind of conversations. I think you're spending too much. Maybe you should spend a little bit less, etc., etc. So we eventually reached a compromise with the wife, and actually with the husband in this particular instance, because the husband had been far too frugal in his expenditure planning. He might have said that the wife was perhaps too extravagant, but I don't think, quite frankly, looking at the figures on both of them, that quite frankly either of them were far off. But we reached a good conclusion that we could treat as a fair conclusion for the purposes of the cash flow, and we can see now we've bought her another couple of years by just doing an equality of income on the pension plus the reduced expenditure plans. We tried a few different things. We also played with, well, what if there was some spousal maintenance that carried on? This was the husband's cash flow model. We can see now he ends up with red coming into his model, etc., etc. But I won't go through all of these graphs because I'm conscious of what the time is. But in a mediation-based environment, the cash flow software can be very good. It's quite empowering for both sides to see what the other side is going to have to deal with. And look, we ended up in a really good place with this particular couple. They ended up, finalizing the divorce. She ended up with a larger share than was required for equality of income reasons on the pension. And quite frankly, the cash flow models, they ended up broadly similar. And dare I say it, we ended up with something broadly akin to equality of cash flow, which was an interesting way for that to have gone. Right. Technology anxiety moment coming up again. Just bear with me. Yes. Okay. Right. Yeah, okay, good. So that was our mediation case that we dealt with. The next one, the last time I'm going to throw to the software, the last of my applied examples is as follows. So we've got ourselves in this instance an individual, a lady who is 65 or very much approaching it, recently divorced, had enjoyed a nice standard of living. part of the settlement from the divorce was the family home had to be sold. Helen is the name of the lady. She's going to receive a nice chunk of cash as well as a pension share. What fears have been extracted from her in our financial planning meeting? Well, it was not an unusual fear whether someone's going through a divorce or they're not going through a divorce is, well, I don't think I'm going to have enough money to live on. I'm going to have to change my standard of living. Those are pretty normal fears. She will have to purchase a smaller house than she would ideally want, or perhaps move to an area that she isn't familiar with. So she was hoping to use the cash to maybe purchase the property outright. She doesn't have a clue how pensions work beyond the defined benefit scheme that she's already dealing with. And in short, she's worried about what life might look like for her, and resolve to living a life where she has to struggle to make needs. Now let's go through the next phase of anxiety for me. Oh, fantastic. Okay, right. Well, here we go. We can see in this particular example, we've got ourselves a few different what ifs that I just wish to talk you through. Number one is just a great big chunk of change coming in, normal expenditure patterns. In theory, this all looks great. There's no red in the model. The great big spike at the beginning, of course, is the purchase of the new house. However, there was then a debate around, well, I really wouldn't mind a house that was worth a little bit more. Okay, so we managed to plug that through, and things were looking okay on that front. And then the next question came to us, well, I want a bigger house, but I'd also like to spend a bit more too. Okay, so we've now got a more expensive house, and we've got more expensive spending habits going on, and naturally that has then brought forward the fact that we're now seeing red arriving at age 89. A quick tangent from me on this point, because Blue Sky, we choose to run our cash flow models through to age 100, and sometimes that comes up as a conversation point. Why do you do age 100? Well, the 50 percentile for a woman, I believe, to pass away is 89, for a man 84. And I suppose we could argue, looking at this cash flow model, is if she manages to hit the 50 percentile mark, all could be good. But of course, naturally, we're slightly more pessimistic as financial planners, and therefore we want to assume that perhaps she's one of those that manages to live beyond the 50 percentile of 89 for a woman. So this flags to us a bit of an issue. We, in some respects, don't mind seeing a bit of red because it helps with clients' expectations, and it brings forward the need to debate how compromises might need to exist. Naturally, one compromise is buy a cheaper house, another one is spend less, and another one is, well, look, carry on as you are. Early part of retirement is a time to go out and explore the world. So maybe there's another answer. And in this case, it was carry on spending at that same level. That's fine, but at some point you're going to need to consider downsizing in order to release equity. And we can see in this cash flow model that by doing a downsize later on in life, it does remove the red. In fact, if I go to what we call the asset graph, we can see a bit more what was going on. This color here at the bottom is the property that she bought right at the beginning. We can see that at 85, she sells the property, which releases cash. And if she's effectively eating that cash for the next, 5, 6, 7, 8 years time, which has meant that her pension, the green bit, has been left alone for a few years to regrow. And we can see that by the time she passes away, when we've made her 100, we still have what, 140 odd thousand pounds sat in the pension. Okay, so hopefully that helps to understand a little bit more about her situation. Okay, next slightly panicked moment as I try to bring things back to the standard presentation. Just bear with me a second. Right. Okay. Okay. Right. So for that situation, it's also worth noting that for a client that's a Blue Sky client, having done that financial plan, that cash flow model for her, having done the pension sharing implementation, we would expect for that client that we would catch up with her annually. Why? Well, because each year we'll revisit that cash flow model. We'll have the Blue Sky process is that we write to the client about 6 weeks before their annual catch-up meeting, so that they can present us with what updates have occurred in their life. Yes, it might be, well, what's the latest bank balance? How's your health? Is there any plans that you've got that are substantial? Do you need to spend money on a new car? All of these bits and bobs, so that by the time the client arrives in the office for their annual review meeting, we have already updated the cash flow to reflect that person's life that takes into account a year's worth of living. All right. So for us, cash flow is so important here at Blue Sky, whether that client is, well, as the next slide suggests, whether that client is going through, let's bring that slide up, whether that client is at that early stage, as we saw with our Mickey Mouse client example, is in the middle with my mediation example, or like we just saw with that last case, is right at the end and is needing that help in terms of planning the next phase of their life. Now, I did promise at the beginning that in terms of physical slides, there wasn't so many slides. I hope you found them to be useful, but we finished quite nicely ahead of schedule, which means, I guess, in theory, that we will, Jeremy and I will open the floor to any questions that might exist. Yes, right. Jeremy, are you there?
I'm still here, Rob. Yes, I'm still here. And look, we will be around for the next 5-10 minutes as well, if anybody does have any questions that they want to ask. But for those of you that might want to pop off to a 3 o'clock meeting, or indeed just want to go and have a coffee or whatever, thanks to Rob for a very illuminating session there. And thanks once again for everybody that joined us today. So I hope you've got a few ideas as to how cash flow can help you and your clients. We certainly don't see it as something that's just at the end of the process, as Rob mentioned there. We think that it's actually a really great tool to help with the bargaining phase, and have many examples of how we've used this with real life clients, and how it has led to things coming to a close sooner rather than later. So look, if you listen to all 3 of our webinars, then well done, gold star. If not, the recordings will be on our website, so please feel free to dive in. There's also a wealth of other webinars that we've done over the years on the website, which are all there to help you learn a bit more about this subject and how you can help your clients. So in the new year, I think we'll do some more of these webinars, and our thoughts at this stage are definitely one on PAG 2, as and when that arrives. We are assured that it should be with us middle of January, so as soon as that comes out, we'll be all over it. We'll put a webinar together, pick out the key highlights and implications for you all, and then present that to you, hopefully at the end of January, sometime in February. We might also dive into a couple of subjects that I mentioned last week. Lifetime allowance, hopefully we'll have finalised rules in place early next year sometime. And if we're feeling particularly Brave, we might also do one on McLeod as well. So let me just have a quick look at the Q&A. Can't see any questions there at the moment, but will remain open for the next 5 minutes or so. So once again, thanks to everybody for joining us today. And dare I say it, at the start of December, happy Christmas. And hopefully you all get to go and have some time off with your family and friends. And we'll see you in the new year.